Hello everyone, my name is Dean and welcome back to the 20 and 20 challenge. This is week 12 actually. And this week we're going to be taking a look at using GraphQL inside of Ruby on Rails. So GraphQL is sort of a database wrapper if I understand things correctly. Now granted, I've only been looking at it for about 5 days now, so I probably don't understand it correctly. But the basic premise as far as I can understand is instead of having this RESTful API that has your CRUD actions, you have a single entry point into your application that you can just query or you can mutate. So you have two operations with GraphQL. You have your queries, which are, hey, I know you have some data. I would like to have that data. So, in the same way that Credit Karma sells all your information to people in exchange for free credit reports, maybe you want to sell some information to people through an API. Or maybe you want to be your own consumer. So in week 4 and week 5, I think, we created two different versions of an API using Ruby on Rails. Maybe you want to do something similar. You want to have an API, but instead of using like a RESTful API, maybe you just want to have a single endpoint where you just grab whatever information you need and get it back. So that's sort of what you can do here. You just say, okay, well, I know you have some posts. I would really like the post title and maybe the post body or something. And that's all you really have to do is just request that information. It sends it back if you're, authenticated or whatever. Alternatively, in like a RESTful situation, you might have a route, and this route might say, this is your post page. You go there and you request the post, you get the post back. You don't really get to pick and choose which tables and rows you want unless the developer sort of structured all of that for you. Now, granted, here you also do have to structure some of it. Like you can't just go into, the application we're building today and say, well, you have authors and you have posts. I'd like all of the posts, please. If, I just generated a Rails app and added GraphQL because I didn't sort of create that functionality for you. There's nowhere in the code where I'm returning, post.all, so that just doesn't exist. But, the more you scaffold out some of these things, like all your posts, and you create like a basic query that says, if you go here, you can access the posts. You get some of this functionality that you wouldn't traditionally get. And I'm kind of excited to show you guys because, this is just something that I learned in the last week or so. So let's go ahead and let's just jump into some code. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is create a new Rails app. And let's go ahead and let's call this like our GraphQL intro or something. And then we'll also pass in the -- API flag, which will run it in API only mode. And then we can do -- skip -test to skip the test. And we can also do a -- skip -spring to skip spring. I don't know if that last part's necessary, but it covers some time, gets us to the 10-minute mark on this video. So let's go ahead and let's cd into this new folder we just created. And I'll type code dot to open this up in my text editor. You can, of course, open this in whatever you would like. So we need to add in 2 gems here. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just I'll add them with a bundle command. You can also just put them into the gem file, but I'll just do it this way this time. So say bundle add GraphQL. You can see over here after it runs the bundle command, it'll add it to the gem file. And then we also need a bundle add graphical -rails. So this first one is just the GraphQL gem that we're covering today, of course. And this one is the GraphQL interface for Rails. So that's what the I stands for, I think. But after we do that, we can then run a Rails g GraphQL install command. And that's just going to run our setup for the GraphQL. So the next thing we need to do is, I guess, close the gem file because we're done in here. We need to come into app and we need to create an assets folder. So let's go ahead and let's say new folder, assets. Inside of this assets folder, we need another new folder called config. And inside of that config folder, we need to create a new file and call this manifest.js. And let's make sure that's in the right directory. Looks like it is. And then here what we need to do is we need to link 2 files. So I'll say link graphical /rails/application.css. And then we also need to do a link for the graphical /rails/application.js. So we can save that. And now we need to come into, I believe it's our config folder and our application.rb. and we need to uncomment the sprockets / realty. So once we have all of that set up, I believe we can proceed to probably the routes folder, or the routes file. So let's come over to routes.rb because we now need to actually create a route for this graphical to run. So let's go ahead and let's do a check here. We're going to say if rails.env.development ? So if we're in development, we'll run a mount GraphQL : Rails : engine. So we want to route the graphical Rails engine, and we want to mount this at the /GraphIQL path, and the GraphQL _ path is going to be the same as this one. So what you want to do is just type /, paste in your GraphQL path, and that's basically it for the routes here. So now I think at this point we should, in theory, be able to run Rails S and hopefully not have everything crash. And if we go to localhost port 3000, it looks good. And then if we go to /graphical, you can see here that we have a interface. And there's going to be a bit of a spoiler here with the stuff that we're creating today, but you'll probably see something that's closer to like query, and it'll just be like an empty query with maybe a test string being printed out or something. So that's the basic gist of what of what you should be seeing here. So you'll have this interface over here, and you'll have like the results here. And if you come into your graphical or your GraphQL folder, you should see you have the intro schema here, which has your mutations and your queries. So your mutation is how you create, delete, edit, update, whatever stuff. And your query is how you get information. So if you want to edit or add or delete information, you'll run a mutation probably. And if you just want to get information, you'll probably run a query. So you have your types here. You can see you have a query type and you have a mutation type, self-explanatory. So here you have a base mutation, which is added by the generator, which is just a test field that prints out hello world. And you also have a query type here, which is another test field that just prints out hello world. So, if you type in test field into your graphical here, and then if you hit the play button or whatever you want to call it, the run button, it'll return some data that has a test field that has the string hello world. So that's, basically how this will work. And the same thing for like a mutation. You also have your mutation that you can run through here to create like a test field. But okay, let's go ahead and let's add in some actual usable code here. So let me close the server, and let's get started by creating some basic Rails models that we've all come to know and love. So we'll say Rails G model. We'll create a post. The post will have a title of type string by default and a body of type text. Let me just actually full screen this real quick so you can see this. So we'll run this model generation here. We'll then create another model. We'll say Rails G model, and this is going to be an author. We'll give the author just a name. And this is very basic. Now you could make this like a devise model, but for the purposes of this tutorial, it's just to show like the has many and belongs to relationships. So we have a post here and we have an author here. And now we want to say, okay, we want the post to have a reference to the author. So we'll say Rails G migration add _author _to _posts. We'll say that the author : references. And you could, of course, do like a belongs to relationship here or something, right? But okay, let's go ahead and let's clear this and let's exit the full screen mode. And I'll just hit Control L to clear this. So now let's come over to our models folder and let's take a look. We have the post.rb and we have the author.rb. So the post.rb, we know that this belongs to an author. And we know that the author has many posts, right? If we come down to our DB folder and our migrations, we should see 3 different migrations. We have the create post migration right here, which just created our post model. So it's got a title and it's got a body. We have the author migration, which just gives the author a name. And we have the one where we added the author to the posts, and you can see here that null is false. It has a foreign key, which is true, of course, and that's going to give us the author ID. Okay, so that's all great, but now how do we translate this to GraphQL? Because you can see here we haven't really added anything. How do we do this? Well, we could manually create this, but we do also have access to some GraphQL generators. So if we come over to GraphQL, you can see on there, so this is the Ruby doc info for the gems GraphQL. I can't really full screen this, but I guess I could paste this over here so you guys can see this. So it's Ruby doc info gems GraphQL. I'll have this in the video description as well. But yeah, so if you come here, you'll see examples of how to create your mutations. So we'll just create like some blank mutations and objects here using these generators. And then you can sort of take it from where we run it here and make some more advanced stuff on your own. So maybe you want to like do some of these generators yourself. Hopefully this will show you how to use them, and then you can just like build off of what we do here. But like always, we're going to start, and I'm going to full screen this because it's a bigger one. We're going to start by using Rails G. We'll then say Rails G GraphQL : and we want to create an object. We want this object to be for the post. And we know that the post has a title of type string, capital S. It has a body of type text with a capital T, and it has an author of type references. I'm not actually sure if this will work, but like always, there's only one way to find out. So it looks like it's upset here for reasons unknown to me. Let me just go ahead and let me read through this. We have post title, string, body, text, author, references. I bet it's because I didn't run a migration. Let me do a Rails DB :migrate command. And then let me try to run this Rails G GraphQL object post title, string, body, text, author, references command, which is a mouthful. Yes, I would like to force this. So that should hopefully handle the GraphQL object generation. Let's do another one. So we'll say Rails G GraphQL object. And for this one, let's say we want to create an author that has a name of type string and a post of has many. So we'll run that one as well. Cool, it looks like that worked. And we'll save the mutations for a minute here. So what we did here is we created two types. We created a post type, and we created an author type. And this is all inside of our GraphQL folder here. So let's go ahead and let's open up this author type. So you can see here that this correlates to our database schema. So we have our author has an ID, it has a name. It also creates the created at and updated at fields for us, which Rails, of course, provides automatically. And then it creates the name. And then you can see here that the field post is a types, and it's a has many types. And if we go into the post type, it's going to be something similar. It's just going to be a little bit more advanced. So here you can see that we have an ID, we have our title, we have our body, created at, updated at, and then we also have our author ID and our title, body, and author here. And that's because we passed in some additional arguments there that it was smart enough to generate by default. So if you set up your migrations correctly, I believe that a lot of this is like duplicated work that you don't actually have to do. So the first thing we can do here is we can say, well, we already have a title and a body. We don't need those two, right? We do have an author ID and we do have an author, so we can keep those. So that's pretty snazzy there. Let's go ahead and let's start our server. Oops, looks like my console is all over the place. Let me do this, and then let me clear my server, and let's run a Rails S command. One of the joys of working with 8 different windows to get anything working. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's clear this, and let's go ahead and let's just do some exploration of the docs. So if we open up this docs window right here, you can see that we have the queries and the mutations. If we click on query, it just right now has this text field of type string. And if we come over to the mutation, you can see it just has this test field as well. So if we wanted to, in theory, we should be able to, let's stop our server, and let's run a Rails C command to open up a console, and let's do an author equals author.new. And then we can do, let's say author.name equals, and I'll just say Dean for this. And then I'll say author.save. And now we have one author in our database, right? So let's go ahead, let's clear this, drop out of the console. It's Control D to exit out of the console, and then we can run a Rails S command again to start the server, and then we can refresh this page. So now we have an author. Let's go ahead and let's maybe try to document some of these post types here. So one of the nice things about GraphQL is you can actually add in some like inline documentation for your graphical browser here. So for example, we have this field with an ID. We can say, let's do something in here, and we can just do a description. So say this is the, I guess this post's ID, right? And it's pretty much the same for all of these other ones. You could just do a do block for each one. So you can say do description. This is the post, this post's title. Okay, so that was my bad. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to add in the rest of these descriptions real fast. The reason why this isn't showing up is because we don't actually have a query type defined. We're just messing about with with the post type right now, but without the query type defined. So we'll just create this, the rest of these descriptions real fast. So we'll say this is this post's body, which is the main content of the post. Then we also have a description for the created at. So we'll say description is the date/time that this post was created at. We then also have a do block for this one where we'll say a description, and this is the date/time that this post was last updated at. We then have an author ID, which we can say this is like description, the ID of this post's author. Add in the period because we like good punctuation here. And then for the author, this will just be like or this post's author in object form or something. It doesn't really matter. We're just doing this for a bit of flavor. So now if we like refresh, we still can't actually see any of the changes we made here because we don't have our query type defined yet. So let's come into our query type and let's change this around a bit. So right now we just have this test field. We can go ahead and we can remove all of this. Let's instead say we want a field for the posts, and this is going to be an array, and this is going to be types : post type, exactly like that. Null should be false. And for this, we'll also do a do block. We'll say a description. And this is a query that selects all posts. Right, so for this one, we need to def posts end. And in here, let's just return post.all. And just to make this clear, I'll also include the return here. So we can save that, and that will return all of the posts as needed. We can also add in one where we'll say maybe we want a field for the posts count. This will return an integer. Null should be false. And for this, we'll also do a do block. Description of, we'll say this is a query that returns the total number of posts. For this, right below here, we'll say def posts count end, and this is just going to return the post.count. And the reason why I'm describing these is because it was a little bit fuzzy for me how this all worked. And once I started adding in all these descriptions after I found out how to actually do this, this is where things started making a bit more sense for me. Because it also allows me to see like where this description appears inside of my Explorer, right? Right now it's upset at me for some reason. Can't read property type of undefined build client schema. So what we also want to do here is create some mutations, and we'll just do that real quick as well, just so that we can finish off our generation commands here. So let me full screen the console again, and I'll say we need to do a Rails G GraphQL : mutation, and let's call this the create author mutation. And then we can also do a Rails G GraphQL mutation, and we'll call this one the create post mutation. We'll run this generator, and then we can exit the full screen. And I can hit Control L again to hopefully fix some of this. And the reason why we're getting this error was probably because I didn't set up the queries correctly or something, but we can just explore that together real quick. So let me go ahead and let me open up my other version of the code, and we can just pop over to the mutation real fast. So I didn't create an author mutation for this because I was hoping to leave that as an exercise for you guys. So I'm going to be leaving the create author blank, but you should be able to just basically copy what we do in the create post mutation to create an author as well. So what we can do is we can say inside of the create post, we're going to have a couple of fields. So we have a field for the post. This is going to be a types post type. And now, of course, depending on which file you're in, you're going to be in a different module with a different namespace. So in some of these, you might not need to use the types. In others, you will. Here, we're not using any types namespace. So you probably need the types. I'm not too familiar with how this works in Rails. I come from the wonderful world of C++ here, so bear with me. But we do need to create a couple arguments here. So we're saying this is the field, and the field has multiple arguments. So what do we expect the arguments to be? Well, we expect one of the arguments to be for the title. This is going to be of type string. It is a required field, so we'll say required is true. We'll also give this a do block where we say description, and this is like the title field is a string type and is required for a new post to be created. Something like that. We then have an argument of type body, or I guess it's the body argument, and this is going to be of type string, which is also going to be required true. For this, we'll say this is a description where this is the post's main content. It is called the body, and it expects a string or something like that. I don't actually know if this is supposed to be a string or what I called it, but we'll see. Then we also have an argument for the author. So we're forcing ourselves to pass in the author ID here. So we'll say this is required true, do, description. This is the ID of this post's author, right? So that's all of our arguments, but how do we actually handle the creation stage, right? Because in a typical Rails controller, you have something like def create, and then you do like at post equals new post, blah, blah, blah. And then you say like if at post.save, then redirect to at post or something, right? And otherwise throw some errors. So you have like else, throw errors, sad face or something, right? And then end. So how do we do that here? Well, instead of saying def create, we actually have a def resolve method, which takes in a title, a body, and an author. And you'll notice that this matches up with our arguments up here. We can then say end at the bottom, and then we just say at post equals post.new, and this should seem fairly familiar for you. So we have a title, which is the title. We have a body, which is the body. And we have an author, which is going to be author.find_by_ID, and it's going to be the author. And then down here we can say if at post.save, end, if I can spell correctly. So if it saves correctly and properly, we can then say that this is a post at post, and the errors we expect to be just an empty array. Else, something went wrong, so the post is going to be nil, and we're going to return some errors. And for this, we can say post.errors, I guess it's at post.errors.full_messages or something like that. And I think that should work for this actual create post mutation. Now, of course, we're still going to run into some issues over here because there is an error that we need to figure out. Now, one thing I have noticed about GraphQL is that the errors are just far from helpful. So a lot of times you're going to run into some problems. So right here, all it's really telling us is that it cannot read property types of undefined. And since this issue appeared once we created, the query types, I'm assuming that's where one of the problems is. So it looks like this should actually not be an array. I'm dumb. But let's come over to the query type real quick, and we'll see if I maybe messed something up in here. I'm not really seeing anything that I messed up in here. So this could also be for the, I guess, the post type. So let's come over to the post type. We have the ID, the title, the body. We have the created at, updated at, author ID, and the author. This should not be a references type. This should be an author type. I don't know why I did that. And here you can see we're in the module for the types. So this can almost certainly also be removed and replaced with something like that. I'm not sure where else this issue is. Maybe in the author type it's so in the author type, this should not be a has many type. I'm assuming that it doesn't actually even have a reference to the posts here, maybe. But field post types should be, I guess, because it's an array, we'll just say types : post type. And because we're in the module of types, again, I'm being dumb, we can probably just do something like that. Refresh the page, and now we don't have any errors, which is fantastic. Considering how little I knew about GraphQL a couple days ago, I'm absolutely thrilled about this. We can also get rid of this name here because it's a duplicate. And let's actually move this post up to the top just to clean things up a little bit. So in here, again, you can add in your descriptions. I'm going to skip this one. I'm trying to leave the author a little bit more blank for you guys, so you have like a starting point to jump off of. But let's go ahead and let's try to create something here and see what happens. So our queries now have descriptions and they have actual stuff in it. So that's good. That means that at least that part's working, right? Let's try to create a post through this monstrosity that we've concocted here. So I'm going to zoom in quite a bit here just to make sure that this is visible for you guys. And instead of saying a query, although I guess you could leave the query here if you wanted to and just comment this out, because this does support comments. So we can just comment that out. Instead, let's say we need a mutation. Mutation. And you'll notice that there is some heavy auto-completion here, which is very nice. So we want to create a post mutation. This takes in an input. And this just allows you to, add in a whole bunch of fields under the input flag. So we'll say this is a title. Let's give this a hello world title. I don't know why it didn't want me to put a space there. Then we need a, we have the body, or the comma. We now need a body. So for this, let's say, this is my first post from a GraphQL setup. Neat. And then for the author, this is author number 1, because I think I'm the only author at this point. It's not a very popular app yet, but we're getting there. And then after the brace, we then have the parentheses, then we create another open brace, and here we need to say this is a post. So we're returning a post here, I believe. So this needs to return, I guess, let's say an author ID. We should return a title. And you'll see here, when I type this for the body, your documentation also appears in the autocomplete. So here we can see, well, I want this post body to be in here because that's the main content of the post. So that's also pretty cool how they do that. And then I'm pretty sure you can also, do this multiple times if you wanted to. And you can see that the text appears over here. But okay, let's say you want to comment out this entire mutation. So I'll just hold Control and hit the question mark key, or I guess maybe the / is what it's called. And that will just comment all of this out just like it would in a text editor, right? So if I were to like say, you know, I don't want these 3 fields, I hit Control and question mark, it comments it out. That hotkey also works inside of our graphical interface, which is very nice. But okay, we created this post. Let's actually not comment this out. I'm going to create a second post just so that we have 2 to work with. So I'll say post number 2, and then, I don't know, like the sequel is never as good as the first. And I'll just run this again. This will create another post, I believe. And now let's comment this out for realsies. And let's try to create a query. So let's uncomment this. Now, one thing to note about the query is I believe you can just also leave this blank. I just like to leave it here because if I know it's a mutation, I also want to know it's a query unless I'm just doing a one-off. But in this case, because I'm constructing it, I like to be a bit more organized. So if I type in post, you can see all of the options we have here for our posts. Now, we have our query that selects all the posts, and we have our post count that returns the total number of posts. You can, of course, also see this over here. So let's go ahead and let's just grab the post count. Let's just make sure we created 2 posts. I'm going to hit Control and Enter to run this. And you can see the data being returned is a post count of 2, which is good because we just created 2 posts, right? Well, let's say we also want to grab all of the posts. So for this, we can say posts. And if I hit Control and Enter here, you can see that it automatically adds in the ID just to avoid that ugly error. But okay, what else does the post have access to? So let's go into the posts and let's see what we can use. Well, we have an author. That's pretty cool. Let's try to grab an author, right? So I'll say comma. So for every post with this ID, so I know which ID it is, I want to see the author. Let me just hit Control and Enter to run this. And you can see here that it just automatically grabs the ID of that author to, again, avoid the error. But what happens if I click on this author? Well, I can see that there's a name. We created a name. This isn't documented yet, but it does have a name. So maybe instead of this ID, I just want to grab the name. And it apparently is self-descriptive. Interesting. Well, if I run this, you can now see that it's showing me the name of the author of this post for each one of these. And if you had multiple authors, it would, of course, show you the name for each one. Okay. Well, let's maybe get rid of this ID for the post, and let's say I want the title of the post, and maybe I want the body of the post. And maybe for the author, I want to show the author ID at the post level and not at the author level. So let's also throw in the author ID. And then I'll hit comma, and I'll run this. And you can see here that now our query is starting to look a bit more involved, right? We can also come into the author. We can add in the author's ID. We have the author's name, and then maybe we want to see like how long this author has been a user. So let's just grab the created at. So you can see here, while this user was created at 2020-07 at whatever this time converts to, which is probably off because I haven't reformatted my times for my Rails application. But you sort of get the idea here. This basically functions exactly how a regular Rails app would work, but you can sort of do all of this without needing to, grab all the models and stuff. You have a single entry point. You don't have to go into different routes. It's not very, it's not a RESTful API, but it's a one-size-fits-all API, right? You just throw in your query, grab the data you need, leave the rest of it, which makes it more efficient in that sense. And it's just a very nice environment to work with and debug with, especially. And then when you move over to production, of course, you just you have this setting in your routes, which gets rid of this graphical interface, or you can even leave the graphical interface if you're trying to give a demo of your API. So like if we come over to a new tab here, I'll just search for, let's say GraphQL e-commerce open source, right? So here you can see that I was looking at Sailor, I guess is what it's called. And if I click on this, And if I go to, I guess, a demo, right? So I'll check out the product, it's open source, and I'll say, well, I want to see a demo of this. And there's the GraphQL API up here in the corner. I'll click on that. And here you can see you have this exact same interface that we were just using, but it's like on their production server-ish, in the sense that they give you a demo that you can then query, and you can get, like in this case, products back with the name and the description. But you can sort of see how this would also be useful in some production scenarios. And of course, you can hit like prettify to get rid of this and reformat it. You also have your history here of all your queries and stuff. But yeah, I think that's basically all I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope that this was helpful. I'm going to go ahead now and move over to the outro video. Okay, so that's going to do it for this week's 20 and 20 challenge. Now, this is probably going to be part 1 in a small series on GraphQL because there is some other stuff I'd like to cover. I have been looking at Devise. I make no promises there. It might require a couple extra videos where I just sort of get up to speed on things because I was thinking about maybe doing some type of token authentication or something, but we'll have to see because I really have no idea what I'm doing, if I'm being completely honest, which is totally normal for this channel. But, you know, this is a bit more advanced stuff, so it will take me some, you know, trial and error to get there, hopefully. But I do have some wonderful members in the community that I can reach out to for help. So, you know, if you do have some experience with using token authentication or GraphQL or anything like that, let me know in the comments because I might reach out to you for questions when I get stuck in about probably 5 hours after this video goes live, in all honesty. But that's going to do it for me. If this video helped you, please remember to like it. If this video didn't help you, then remember to dislike it because we don't want to subject other people to more bad tutorials. Especially in this sort of stage, because there's not a lot of Rails GraphQL tutorials. You know, if this video doesn't help you, then make sure to downvote it so that other people can see that there is nothing out there. Because someone might see my video and think, oh, well, he already covered it, I don't need to then. And if you don't, like, you know, actively downvote stuff, you know, we'll never know. Because, like, that's how I check. I go out and I see, is there a video that covers what I want to talk about? And if there is it like highly upvoted? Okay, then I probably don't need to cover it, right? Because someone else did. So, you know, remember to do that. The downvote doesn't hurt creators as much as you would think it would, at least not in the educational space, because when it comes to education, we're here to help. We're not here to be popular. But, you know, if you like these videos, maybe consider subscribing because there's more coming. You know, we still have 8 more weeks, I guess, or 7 more weeks. Math is hard. It's late and I have to get up in the morning. But yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and I will see you in the next video.